Welcome back to Primetime News.
Special welcome to folks at onespotmedia.com.
Up first this evening, Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson has revealed that there is a link between the declaration of a state of emergency in Kingston and the other two in St. Catherine and St. James.
He did not reveal what the links were, but noted that the security forces are actively pursuing gangs which are wreaking havoc across the island.
General Anderson was answering questions from members of Parliament's Internal and External Affairs Committee today. TVJ's Anthony Lugg attended the committee meeting this morning and filed this report.
3 states of emergency all at once. From St. James to St. Catherine North, now sections of the corporate area. Since the Prime Minister's announcement on Sunday, many, including the opposition, have been questioning the decision. And with the Police Commissioner addressing the Internal and External Committee, some members wanted answers.
What specifically triggered the Joint Command over last week to advise the government to declare a state of emergency in Kingston?
From an intelligence perspective, there are linkages between a number of these areas and other areas that are experiencing challenges. There are linkages with St. Catherine, there are linkages with St. James, there are linkages in the east, there are linkages with Clarendon, there are all sorts of linkages. So in prosecuting our operations and making these decisions, we use a lot of information beyond just a murder rate or shootings.
Murders have been trending down, with the recent data showing a 22% reduction up to September 21 compared to the same period last year. Much of this achievement has been attributed to the states of emergency. Despite the gain, almost 100 fewer guns and over 6,300 fewer ammunition have been seized.
Although you have search techniques and things to do it, but a lot of it is really going to come from information and intelligence that you get. As we say, we're getting better intelligence and we're recovering. If you notice, over time, all of a sudden you're picking up a cache here and a cache there of weapons.
But with the country moving into 8 months under states of emergency, residents in these communities may be wondering when things may return to normal.
The question we may have to ask ourselves is, what is normal? Do we measure normal by whether special powers have been enacted and declared? Do we measure normal by the numbers of troops and policemen that are out on operations? Or do we measure normal by the level of crime and violence in the society?
When do you get to the point that you say, I don't need the state of emergency anymore? My normal policing functions can enable me to get done that which I want to achieve.
And let me just go back to what General Meade said. Even if we had a specific date timeline, it wouldn't suit us because you do have people waiting.
No, I don't want you to tell me that either.
Anthony Lugg, TVJ News.
Meanwhile, General Anderson says the country will soon see an increase in the number of arrests and prosecution of gang members. More in this report.
On Sunday, the third state of emergency for 2018 was declared. But in assessing the impact the states of emergency and zones of special operations have been having on gangs, Internal External Committee Chairman Fitz Jackson was not impressed.
When we ask how many of these gang members and gang leaders have you been able to apprehend between January and now September, 9 months? The numbers I got, to be frank with you, it was confusing to say the least. And secondly, it was very distressing.
Mr. Jackson says this indicates that the criminals are just waiting out the security measures. But Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson says the states of emergency and the use of anti-gang legislation by the police have been disrupting the operations of several gangs.
The nature of gang investigations, though, is that they take time. Because usually there's a fair, especially if it's a well-developed gang, there's a fair amount of resources behind it. They have money, they're linked in all over throughout the society, and so on. So there's the violent part of it, but there's the whole organized crime aspect of it.
General Anderson argues that the security measures are the first step of a process. He says, based on intelligence, they have slowly been making inroads into gang operations and are building cases against them.
You can pick up persons who you know, create enough space that there are people who can give evidence. So it's not surprising that when you detain certain people, all of a sudden the violence drops. It's not by accident. It's because you know things, the intelligence says them, but it's a process of developing a case on an entire gang and all of those issues.
He also argues that with murders declining, the use of anti-gang legislation should lead to more arrests and convictions. This should in turn reduce the number of cases before the courts. However, there are legislative changes that he wants to see.
And I give you, for instance, how we treat with wealth and unexplained wealth and things as it relates to gangs, and how they do what they do with their money. And even when you get a criminal conviction, what you have to do now to go and take away their assets are things that we can look at and see how we make those things smoother.
Herman Green, TVJ News.